Hi guys. So we finally finished reading chapters 3 through 7 of First Samuel. So now we're finally moving on to this book. I know you guys miss it so much. So if you want to read along with me, you can. If you just want to skip this part and go to the questions, that's fine too. Whatever you pick. But I'm going to read this whole thing. So let's get started. All right. Chapter 16, it's on page 139. And it's 20 years of ministry. Okay. Get comfortable. Okay. All right. As we conclude our study of the Judges, we turn to one of the most outstanding people of the Old Testament. Samuel was God's man for one of Israel's most crucial hours. He performed tasks of major significance. He stepped into a position which presented discouraging obstacles, and he moved ahead in spite of them to accomplish what few would have believed possible. Preparation is always important for effective leadership. A person must be qualified for what he or she is to do. Samuel's preparation was uniquely arranged by God. It equipped him in just the right way to step into demanding work God had in mind for him. The story of Samuel's preparation. In the last chapter, the story of Samuel's birth was told. After Samuel was born, Hannah kept her promise and brought him to Eli at the tabernacle. Although Samuel did not live at home, Hannah was able to see him regularly. Each time she visited him, she brought him a little robe. Samuel's education had to be conducted at the tabernacle. Normally, education took place at home with the parents as the teachers. Sound familiar? So just think, what you guys are doing right now is very biblical. Having your parents help you with your work and get things ready for you and to teach you, all of that is very biblical. All right, so it says their primary responsibility was to teach their children the law of God. In Samuel's case, however, the task had to be assumed by people at the tabernacle. Eli, of course, was the one primarily responsible for Samuel's education. The Bible reveals that Samuel soon developed a deep love and respect for Eli. So Eli was like, Samuel's fake dad. Obviously, he still had Elkanah as his dad and Hannah as his mom, but while he was living at the tabernacle, Eli kind of took on that role of a parental figure, right? And it says that Samuel respected him, right, and loved him. Since Samuel lived at the central sanctuary, he was able to gain a first-hand understanding of what it meant to worship God. He grew up with the experience of seeing sacrifices and offerings presented every day. He did not have to learn about them merely from the lips of a parent in a distant city, but was able to see them in actual practice directly before his eyes. So what's really sad is this whole time Samuel is observing the practices that the Levitical priests would perform with the offerings and sacrifices and stuff at the tabernacle. And sadly, his examples are really bad ones, right? You have Hophni and Phinehas who are super misbehaving, right? So even though he's getting a bad example of what to do, he still turns out okay. I don't know a lot of your parents' backgrounds, but I do know, like as a parent myself and like with my husband, even though we have come from different backgrounds, my husband in particular, he had a pretty rough background growing up. His childhood was not easy, and you would never know by meeting him because of his great love for the Lord. So even though you may have had bad examples, you can still be a great person from that. And Samuel's a good example of that. All right. Let's see. Samuel also had the opportunity to actually read and study the law of God. Unlike today, copies of God's word were only available in places of worship. Samuel had the advantage of being educated at the place where these copies were kept. He also had, as his teacher, the man who knew the law of God better than anyone else. Because Samuel lived at the tabernacle, he also had a first-hand knowledge of the sinful conditions in the land. The tabernacle was the place where the priests and Levites discussed the spiritual conditions of the people. Besides this, Samuel was an actual observer of the terrible sins of Hophni and Phinehas at the tabernacle itself. So a little Bible background on page 140 in the gray box. It says, the tabernacle served as a place of worship for the nation of Israel during its early history. On Mount Sinai, after the Lord had given the commandments to Moses, he instructed Moses to construct the tabernacle. This was to be a center for worship and place where the people could focus upon the presence of the Lord. The tabernacle was divided into 2 rooms, the holy place and the Holy of Holies. In the Holy of Holies was the Ark of the Covenant, the holiest item in the tabernacle. The Ark contained a copy. So far, just to let you know, Rose is the only one who has commented on what is in the Ark. So I'm going to say what's in the Ark right now, but Rose gets the extra credit points for it. Woo! Good job, Rose. All right, so the Ark contained a copy of the stone tablet with the 10 Commandments, a copy of the entire law of Moses, a gold pot filled with manna, and Aaron's rod that budded. So those are the things that were in the tabernacle. That's why it was so important. Not in the it was in the tabernacle, but in the Ark of the Covenant, those things were in it. Okay, so the 10 Commandments, a jar with manna in it from the Exodus, because that's what they ate. Manna came from heaven every day. And then Aaron's rod, the staff that he had carried, it had grown little buds all over it. So that was in there as well. All right. Now you know. All right. Responsibilities for the care and moving of the tabernacle were delegated to various families of the tribe of Levi. As the years passed, certain other structures were added to the tabernacle. These included living quarters for the priests and Levites who served there. By the end of the period of Judges, during the time of Eli, some of the attendants actually lived on the premises. Sorry, I'm like trying to read and there's like a gazillion people walking outside right now. It's like everybody in my neighborhood decided to take a walk. Very distracting. They're probably looking at me like I'm crazy talking to my phone right now. Anyway, whatevs. Page 141. And we're at the first full paragraph. It says, at the tabernacle, Samuel received the finest education possible. He also gained an appreciation for the importance of God's word and the sinfulness of the priests and the people. God certainly provided the type of preparation that Samuel needed for his God-given work. There simply could have been no other place or way in which he could have been prepared as well. One of the most important events in his young life was when God spoke to him. One morning, God simply called out Samuel's name. The boy could think only of Eli, his father and teacher, as the source of the call and ran quickly to him to ask what he wanted. This happened twice, and each time Eli told Samuel to return to his room. Eli had not called Samuel. On the 3rd time, however, Eli realized that the boy was not merely having a dream, but was actually being spoken to by God. Therefore, Eli told him that if he heard the call again, to respond with the words, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." And Jonathan had made a good point in one of his comments that stood out to him was that it was 3 times that it took for Eli to recognize that it was God talking to Samuel. 3 times, and the connection there was the same as how Peter denied Christ 3 times, right? And now God's calling Samuel 3 times, and Eli doesn't even know what's going on. It takes him 3 times to realize it. So, the number 3 is an important thing. Okay, next paragraph. Once again, God called Samuel's name. This time Samuel did as Eli had instructed him. God then told Samuel that all that the man of God had told Eli earlier would truly come to pass. Because of the wickedness of Eli's sons, they would both be punished, and the priesthood would be removed from Eli's family. The next morning, Eli wanted to know exactly what God had said to Samuel. It must have been very hard for Samuel to tell Eli that God was going to bring punishment on his house and his sons because of their disobedience. However, Samuel told Eli what God had said. On hearing the news, Eli did not scold or punish Samuel. He simply said, "It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him." Right? How many of us would say that when we're going through a difficult time in our life? And instead of being like, "Why, God?" or "Why is God letting me go through this?" instead to just say, "Let him do what seems good to him," right? Especially right now with the craziness of not being at school and having a virus out there that could potentially be harmful to our families, right? Which is why we're distancing ourselves from people to hopefully protect us from getting sick and passing it on to others, right? But we have to be reminded that God is God. He's going to do what he wants to do. And the best thing that we can do is just let him do what seems to be good. All right. Last paragraph on 141, it says Israel's need for leadership. After the death of Eli and his sons, Israel needed strong leadership. There was so much sin in the land that the morale of the people was at an all-time low. God specially prepared Samuel for this time. Samuel was to be God's leader during this time of national crisis, right? So at this time, they had Samuel, we have President Trump, right? So he's our leader. He's working on everything he can during our crisis that we're experiencing, and we need to pray that he is listening to the Lord, right? It says, page 142, Samuel quickly recognized the staggering challenge facing him as he became Israel's leader. First, he had to face the military challenges in the land. The Philistines had defeated Israel at Aphek. At the time, of course, Samuel had no way of knowing God's plan for disrupting the hopes of the Philistines through the work of Samson. The second challenge facing Samuel was the terrible sins of the people. Samuel knew that the behavior of the people would not be changed quickly or easily. However, he also knew that God's blessing for victory could not be expected until that change took place. Okay, so his 2 major challenges had to do with military issues, right, with the Philistines. And then the challenge of sin. The Israelites were sinning so bad. How was he going to get them back and right with the Lord, right? Luckily, he had training for this, right? He's been training his whole life for this moment. It says one of Samuel's first tasks was to move the tabernacle from Shiloh to Nob. Once the tabernacle was moved to a safe place, Samuel took steps to address the people's sinfulness. Samuel did this by talking directly to the priests and challenging them to do the work to which God had called them. Samuel's message to the priests and Levites that they were to in turn tell to the people included the following. The tabernacle had been safely moved to Nob. Samuel had assumed the leadership as judge and that he intended to put an end to the sinfulness of the people. The priests and Levites were to get busy in their God-assigned task of instructing and guiding the people. The people were to stop worshiping the pagan gods and idols. Of course, this was a difficult task for Samuel to accomplish by himself. Thus, he established what has commonly been called the School of the Prophets. Although this term is not found in the Bible, a group of prophets is mentioned in 1 Samuel 10, 5 through 10, and 19 through 20. So it's almost like prophet school. So we had to kind of teach other priests kind of what to do and what to tell the people that were around them, and how to help them. Page 143. Samuel gathered his students from those who were concerned about the spiritual condition of Israel. The idea of a school came from his need to train them to help him carry out his work. Of course, Samuel was the teacher. According to the Bible, it took Samuel nearly 20 years to accomplish this task. During these years, he traveled among the various cities of Israel to challenge the priests and Levites to resume their places of spiritual leadership. As he traveled from city to city, he trained his prophets to help him with the task. In addition to these responsibilities, he served as judge and leader in Israel. Okay, so he established this school to help teach priests what to say to the people around them, right? Or the prophets, right? At this prophet school. And it says that it took 20 years for him to be able to teach. That's a long time. So hopefully these disciples that are coming out of Samuel's teaching will be able to do some great things for the Lord. Page 143, it says, revival in Israel. As a result of Samuel's work, the nation of Israel experienced real revival as well as victory over the Philistines. The first report of the revival is recorded in 1 Samuel 7:4, where the Bible states, "So the children of Israel put away the Baals and Ashtoreths and served the Lord only." This action of the Israelites was not something that happened overnight. It was the result of Samuel's faithful ministry for 20 years. As part of the revival, 1 Samuel 7, 5 through 6 records that Samuel called all of the people together at a general assembly. The purpose was to demonstrate a collective show of repentance before God. To this call, all Israel is said to have responded, meaning that people from all parts of the land came to publicly confess their sins to God. That must have looked really neat. That must have been a beautiful thing for God to see, for all of his children to finally come back to him and ask for forgiveness and confess their sins to him. While this gathering of the people was taking place, the Philistines were planning an attack. As the Philistines drew near the assembled Israelites at Mizpah, the revival was at its height. When news reached the people that the Philistines were near, they became afraid. The people urged Samuel to call out to God for help. Samuel immediately turned to God for deliverance. 1 Samuel 7:10 says that God thundered with a loud thunder upon the Philistines that day, and so confused them that they were overcome before Israel. The time of year involved was probably during the dry season, when rainstorms and thunder were not expected. The Philistines were totally taken by surprise. The degree of the confusion must have been great because the Philistines turned and fled from the Israelites. God does not always use armies to fight battles. In this case, he did the work by using thunder and rain, which probably was unusually severe. Israel reaped the benefit as the enemy turned in terror and ran. Israel won a decisive victory, and the 40-year oppression of the Philistines was brought to an end. Praise Jesus. Okay. Now, lesson on leadership. Remember, this whole book, the whole point of us reading and going over Judges is to learn and glean leadership skills and understanding. Okay. And Samuel was a really great leader, very godly man, right? So it says, for him, it says viewing obstacles in the proper light. This is page 144. Samuel's first lesson on leadership. If Samuel had been like most men, he would have seen the obstacles facing him and would have never accepted the position of leadership. If he had only focused on the obstacles, he would have been defeated before he even began his work. Now, I don't know about you, but there have been times where I've been on mission trips before and I don't know what I'm going into, right? So like, I went to the Dominican Republic for a while and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. Didn't know what I was going to do. And if I would have known all the things I was going to see, all the things I was going to do, I probably wouldn't have signed up for it, right? Because it was too overwhelming. The task, the obstacles, the things I was going to go through and see would have been too overwhelming. So, same thing when I went to Africa. If I would have known all the stuff I was going to see or experience before I went, I probably would have been like, oh, no, I don't want to do that, right? And so I'm kind of glad that God allowed me to enter in those experiences without knowing anything and just fully relying on God to get me through it, because it was so worth it. And I'm so glad I did all of those things. So Samuel actually knew what he was getting himself into, and he still went for it. That is a great leadership skill, taking on such a huge task, a huge challenge, right? All of the people that you're supposed to serve had turned away from the Lord. Wow, and he still chose to do it. What a blessing he was. All right, so then it says, but he looked beyond the obstacles and saw the greatness of God to conquer them. Of course, God wanted Samuel to lead, since this was God's will for Samuel's life. God would take care of all the difficulties. Someone once said, if God orders it, he will pay for it. This was certainly true for Samuel. All Samuel needed to do was trust God. God is looking for leaders who will view every obstacle from his perspective. There's no obstacle too large for God. All right, so his lesson on leadership was viewing obstacles in the proper light. So instead of, I don't know how you guys are feeling right now with the amount of work you have to do, or trying to figure out Google Classroom or all the different things that you're supposed to do. But I want you to know that you need to look at your obstacles that you may have right now, not by stressing out and freaking out and worrying about what you need to do, when you need to do it, but giving your stresses and your frustration and everything over to God and just allowing him to handle these things for you and get your perspective back on track, right? This is a weird time for teachers too. We're going to be gentle with you. Like if things are late, hey, guess what? It's okay, right? If you don't understand how to do things, or if things aren't working right or whatever, just let us know and we will help you the best way that we can. We are trying to view things in the proper light as well. Even though craziness is happening, God is still moving, God is still working, and God sees it all. Nothing surprises him. All right, so I want you guys to think about that, and there will be maybe just a couple questions regarding this, because this was a lot for you to pay attention to. All right? And now we're fighting over bedtime. I guess I gotta go. Bye, guys. Love you.